Welcome everyone to this webinar. I'm going to cover a bit about growth, a bit about exit planning, and the growth is going to be split into a bit about just ordinary growth and scale. And scale is, I describe that as 10% a month, and growth might be up to 10% a year. But also the whole issue of when you sell your business, what's the transition, both in the business and in your own lives. So, who am I? Well, we'll come back. We'll do an introduction on who my business is. We'll look at business growth strategies, business value, exit planning, and transition. And then I'll have a short time for Q&A at the end. Though I do admit I've got quite a few slides, so I shall have to be quite efficient in my delivery. I lead a team of experienced business professionals with over 90 years of business experience. I'm a chartered accountant by background. I've run my own accountancy business for 15 years. I've provided support and advice to companies from the fractional CFO space, and currently use some dedicated software to assist this. And I'm a certified value builder, which is our exit planning system. My colleague Mark Baxter is an entrepreneurial business owner and consultant. He has over 20 years experience in the business growth as a business growth and scale specialist. He ran his own dot-com business during the boom from the mid-90s to the 2000s. He has also worked in businesses from the low hundreds of thousands to the many millions, and has developed his own business growth system. So we work with progressive businesses like yourselves, and we challenge you to step up and realize your ambitious growth and goals. We use tried and tested systems to support the growth, scale, and exit of your businesses. And we work to devise a roadmap to the destination of your choice. And then we work with you to achieve that goal. We have a network of professionals and advisors who can solve almost any problem that you face, which we cannot solve ourselves. So understanding business growth strategies. So we're going to look at the scalability of growth, optimizing operations, technology, innovation, and acquisition and strategic partnerships. So how do we identify growth? How do we identify where we are in the growth cycle? First of all, I want to look at sentiment and cycles. And then I've got some analysis from what we call the Company 360, which is a holistic approach to understanding your business. Company cycles and sentiment. When you start your business, you are inspired and keen and enthusiastic. That carries on to being excited as the first sales invoices come in, and then a bit frenetic as staff are appointed and more clients are come on board. And becomes a bit anxious and concerned because there's a lot going on, lots of balls in the air, and you have to get to committed, which often means organizing the business in a much more systematic way, may require financing, and you have to be totally committed to the business. Otherwise, you spend your time really being some sort of lifestyle business. Having committed to the growth of the business, you become motivated and elated as all business rolls in and the success of the plans that you've made. And then inevitably frustration sits in as you feel yourself on the treadmill doing the same old thing, and that can lead to being strained. I've met a number of business owners who get to this sort of stage and want to sell out and want to go and do something else, but doesn't have to end there. Can become disillusioned. I had a chap last year who wanted to sell his business in 6 months. He just was so fed up. But actually, the right way forward is to do some research and then to look at the recreation drivers of the business: brand, channel, deploy, ability, and innovate. And this can take you through to maturity, even though in reality you probably will go through a few recreation modules first, as you will go around that space with an ever-increasing complexity of business and finance and people before you get to maturity. the Company 360, we have a system which separates the business into 3 time horizons. So we have the future, which is anchored around vision and purpose, strategic direction, the creation of equity value, and the alignment of stakeholders. I'll speak more about both of those later. And then the today space, which is where most people spend most of their time, is connected to the delivery. So brand is the anchor around this section, but channels, which includes all of the marketing and business acquisition, business development, recording and the retention of customers, which is of vital importance. Businesses often spend so much time in the today space, they don't really think enough about the future. And even if they do, there can be a disconnect between achieving the future and the demands of today. We tend to call this a bit of a bridge. And so our bridge is called the design space, which is tomorrow. And in this space, the deployment of resources is the critical factor. Can somebody turn there? Yes, thank you. Deployment of resources, the abilities of the management team and the staff, innovation, which I think is increasingly a critical importance, and performance of the business, which then connects through to the delivery piece, particularly to retention. And then on the inside, you have the leadership skill sets, which again, I think are becoming more and more important. So the leadership piece, do you have plans around making decisions? Do you understand where you are on the business cycles? Have you got a common culture, or do you allow everyone to bring the culture of their last business into yours and creating a bit of a mishmash? Have you got a process for managing change and risk? We've just been through COVID, we've got war in Ukraine, we've got problems in the Middle East, risks around China and Taiwan, and a whole load of political issues in the EU, even if our political issues have been settled for another 5 years. Communication connects back to decision making. So do you communicate the decisions that you made? How do you communicate them? Do you communicate them throughout the organization? And do people understand what you actually are saying? Have you got momentum and the development of momentum, building a team and trust, and finally building the leadership skills, which then underpin all of these other leadership functions. The other piece that we look at is what we call the 5 degrees of effectiveness. In each of the areas that we look at, we seek to create processes, design, deliver, refresh, and own them in order to embed them in the business. And too many businesses half-heartedly create, don't really design, half-heartedly deliver, never refresh, and nobody outside the CEO actually knows what's what. We define creation is creating a coherent frame of reference so that everyone can have a conversation about the issue. The design piece is a comprehensive plan to address the issue, which is clear and agreed. The delivery is that the plan is actually applied throughout the organization. I'm sure many of you have been in businesses where money is spent with consultants who come in, they write a 50-page document, and it disappears onto a shelf, never to be seen again. We don't believe that that's sensible, and that any plans that are created need to be applied into the business and then latterly refreshed so that we can understand the return on investment for the original planning. And finally, the ownership needs to be throughout the organization. I remember many years ago, I was working in an organization, and the leader's plan was very, very, very clear. And it was so clear that anybody in the organization could actually understand how what they were doing on a day-to-day basis contributed to that strategic objective. The STEM frames, the key frames around this process, are vision and purpose, deployment of resources, and brand. And as I say, too many businesses don't really have a vision and purpose, and that there isn't the deployment of resources is a little bit up in the air. We also look at abilities. We assess people across all of these 20 frames. We look at whether they have properly created them, designed them, delivered them, refreshed them, and owned them. Scored out of 25. We find that the average when we do the initial assessment is 24. I don't know why. Maybe it's the equivalent of 42. But as we work with them, the abilities improve. And this then means that it's the leadership abilities as well as the today, tomorrow, and the future frames are clearer and more embedded in the business and function effectively in helping the business to grow and scale. We also look at this question of scale. Most people mistake scale as revenue and profit, which is actually a mismatch. Scale is not just growing revenue and profit, it is separating the capabilities of the business on its current complement to generate revenue and profit. And so you have a set of resources, which are largely often people, but often can be product as well. There is a theoretical maximum, which is actually needs to be reduced by up to 20%, just because we're never as efficient as we ought to be. And that gives you the maximum productivity for the resources that you have in place. So the initial the initial calculation is to understand the current productivity level and then to work out how to close the productivity gap. Having closed the productivity gap, we're then in a position to actually scale the resources in order to create another productivity gap, which you can then go and work to close. And so over a period of time, you are building more resources that create a productivity gap, which you then work with your teams and your staff to close. And that creates what I call safe scale, because you've got the resources to do it. Your resources are not overstretched. You don't get to the overstretched piece because you ensure that you build the increased resources as you grow the business. Now, this does assume that you never lose a customer or there's a big issue in the market and you might have to scale back your resources. But that's also something that the system enables us to do. So, do you have the tools and techniques on hand to enable you to scale up confidently? Have you and your team the depth of knowledge to scale up effectively? Do you share a common language about what scale up means? And do you recognize where you are in the business cycle so that you can plan for what lies ahead? If you need any help or you want to talk about this, then please get in touch. So looking at growth and technology. So we've got the vision and purpose piece and the deployment of resources and brand. And we want to leverage the technology. The other aspect here, this is also connected, to innovation and abilities here. So we're leveraging growth. We're looking at this technological innovation. We're in a period where technological change is just charging along. 5 years ago, I hadn't heard about Zoom. I didn't think I would ever do cloud meetings like we're doing now. We've got cloud, Zoom, AI is coming over the horizon. Machine learning's been around for a while. Software is becoming more and more sophisticated, and AI is actually in interacting with the software. The whole development in financial technology, robotics is coming back again into manufacturing, as is the Internet of Things. And in each of your businesses, there will be technological innovation unique to you. A lot of this technology needs to be considered from an IP perspective, because that is an asset in the business and is something that has value as and when you exit it. But again, there needs to be clear plans of development. And I again come back to the coherent frame of reference, comprehensive plan, applied plan, and measurement and review, and ensuring that everybody has a clear understanding. Moving on to strategic partnerships and acquisitions, perhaps more relevant to larger businesses. A lot of the American PLCs and huge corporations have grown through both acquisitions and alliances. However, often they fail. I remember Time Warner buying AOL, and I think the company lost value, whereas the Compaq Hewlett-Packard merger generated value, largely because they spent a lot of time looking through the various parts of the business and understanding who had the best product, and they were able to strip out significant cost savings within the business and ensure that the business had effectively best of breed of the systems and products of each of the companies. The other one I think coming up at the moment is Disney. They bought, I think, Pixar. They bought Lucasfilms. They seem to have a cultural issue that the culture internally produces things that the culture externally doesn't like. So you need to make sure that your culture internally is consistent with your culture of your customers as well. Acquisitions and alliances aren't the same, and we need to clarify which work where. Acquisitions are best to increase sales or cut costs. And alliances are more cooperative and not as risky, and they're usually used to enter new markets and new regions. Particularly used in, or as I can see it, in the pharmaceutical industry, where a small business might have developed a new drug, not quite sure whether that drug's going to be successful, but the sales delivery channels of the larger business are much more effective at getting the drug to market, and it gives the pharmaceutical business, the larger pharmaceutical business, an opportunity to see how successful the drug is, and if it is successful and is accepted by the market, then they have an opportunity to snap up their alliance partner, and the alliance partner has effectively an exit opportunity. We have questions around when to acquire and when to form alliances, and there are various strategies and synergies around those. There are issues around natural resources, redundant resources, which we've talked about in the Compaq Hewlett-Packard merger, market factors, as we've discussed in the pharmaceutical industry, degrees of uncertainty, again, we talked about that, connected to new products, and competitive forces that lead to effectively industry consolidation, as we've seen. I've seen particularly in the accountancy software industry. Microsoft did a lot of acquisitions a number of years ago, and Sage have done some similar acquisitions as well. What have we got here? So we move on to maximizing business value. I want to talk here about brand, because I think brand is particularly important in this piece. Also, I'll talk about improving financial performance and the operational efficiencies. So looking at brand, to me, brand covers 4 areas: the market that you're in, the service that you provide, the product that you deliver, and the price, though not necessarily seen in those ways. So brand is the cornerstone of the delivery section, connecting to effectively the marketing, sales, and retention. So the key piece of the market, who's your ideal customer? And that's an important process. You need to understand that, analyze that. Some years ago, I was listening to a tape series, tells you how long ago that was, and the chap said, well, what do your best customers look like? What are their common characteristics? And at the time, my common characteristics were married men who hadn't been to university. And those people were my best clients. So you will have your version of that. Now, service is not what you do. It is how you deliver it. It is the style of your relationship with the customer. and how you make your engagement distinctive and personal. We move on to product, which is not what you do or what you sell, it's what the customer receives. So, for example, Amazon, yes, they sold, when I first came across them, they sold books, but actually they also gave you a whole load of other ideas of other books that you didn't know about that actually fitted the algorithm, or the algorithm fitted with the book that you had chosen. And more recently, they rolled that out to a whole lot of other products that you can go and search and look and get an idea, well, can I buy this or that? What might work? And so instead of traipsing around shops, you can go to Amazon and find the answers. And they also, as I've noticed recently, the whole returns space has been made more efficient and much more easier by their opening of returns places in local shops. And so the experience of buying is often what actually drives people to choose to use, in this case, Amazon, or in another case, your business. And finally, price. And price is why what you do valuable, and why should the customer buy from you, but also how do they see you? And this moves a bit more into the next piece, which is market. If you separate it out into the top end, the bottom end, and then upper and lower middle, I've increasingly seen in the last 6 to 9 months businesses who instinctively want to be at the premium end, upper middle to premium end of the market. And they're building a good product, whether it's software or a service that they're delivering. And yet they end up pricing it unreasonably cheaply. And when I have talked to them about this, it's, well, I feel I need to have it cheap to get more business. But there's a mismatch between the price that they're charging and the quality of the service and the product that they are delivering. And I think that it's really important to understand, well, where's the price point and how is that made consistent across the service and product? And if you have in a market which is price sensitive, then maybe you have to look at the product and the service and adjust them to meet that price point, and maybe the marketing has to change as well. The other piece is to, a couple of cases that I'm referring to, it was a question of, why don't you just raise your prices? Because actually you have a product that is well considered in the market, and you don't need to price it at half the price of the competition, because you're as good or better than they are. So that's something I think that everyone needs to consider in the current climate. And if you want to talk about brand and review your brand, then do give me a ring. Looking at KPIs, profitability, and other metrics, we've got the 7 business drivers of growth and sales, profit, and cash. I'll show you a business overview report from our software, and I'll also give you an example of how one of our spreadsheets works that enables you to look further forward in your business. So we analyze businesses, analyze the turnover from how many customers do you acquire, how many customers that you have previously acquired do you retain, what is the transaction value on average, and how often do people buy from you. And then we look at the gross margin, which the other side of that is what's the cost of sales and why. We look at cash flow overall, and then look for some quick wins. And here is an example. I know it's a bit difficult to read, but it's the best I could do. So we have an overview report, which isn't filled with numbers. You have the current month compared to the same month last year, the current quarter compared to the same quarter last year, and the last 12 months compared to the previous 12 months. So it's a rolling basis. And you can see the absolute figures here. And if there's a green comment underneath, it's improved. And if it's a red one, it hasn't. It's gone the other way. And you can also see the quarterly performance. And this gives you an easy, ready reckoner as to where the business is going, where there might be issues. So, for example, though this is green, you've got a reduction in overheads, which looks quite high, which may be because either it's a possibility that there were overheads costs in the previous year that aren't repeated in this year, or it could be that there are some accruals which haven't been posted properly. Moving on to the two key pieces here, the revenue drivers. So you can see how many transactions you've had this year and last year, and also the average value per transaction. And you can see the extent to which you have, this is the revenue impact of those changes. And then we look at customers acquired, and we can see here that the customers acquired have gone down. Customers retained has actually gone up, so that's good. So the retention rate is 51%, but the lost customers, we're losing customers at 48.9%. So you can see the negative impact of those two. We then have profitability, and this little chart here shows the impact of changes in turnover and changes in gross margin and what the impact of that is on profit. We then have the current ratio, current assets less current liabilities, and the debtors and creditor days alongside the cash, well, when I say the cash balance, the overdraft balance. And so why are those important? They're important because we then start to look at those key switches in the business, and we have the ability to look at them from on one of our forecasting spreadsheets. Now I'm going to try and be clever and pick up my this spreadsheet. So this is the demo company. It's a real company. So you've got the statistics for last year, the statistics for current year, and then the current year numbers are then projected for 5 years. So you can see that the company, if nothing else changes, its revenue will go from just over 1 million to 926,000. And that's largely because it is actually losing customers. It's not replacing the customers that it has. We're assuming that the gross margin stays the same, that the price charge stays the same, but the number of transactions goes down in connection with the number of customers. And then we also have a look at the cash flow. Currently 53,000 overdrawn, going down to 66.7However, what we can do is to look at some changes that might make. So if we said we're just going to change these by 5% a year, and we can see the impact that might have on the business. And if you think about it, changing 5% a year, I'm going to say debtor days come down by 5, and creditor days go up by 5, I think. No, yeah. So that has changed the turnover. Instead of it being 926,000, it's gone to 2.7 million. And that's all you've done is looked at those key drivers and said, okay, my target is 5%. And you can then go to your staff and go to your plans. I want 5% this year, 5% in customers, 5% in transactions, 5% in reductions in lost business, and 5% in price. Now, you can then develop your plans, which may mean you get feedback that says, well, we can't do 5%, we can do 3%, or yes, we can do 5%, maybe we can do 7%. And so you use that as an interactive discussion piece with in your business, and that enables you to look at where you could be in 5 years. And you can see here that the value of the business has gone up, I think, from minus £262,000 to 12 million. So, but then we have a look at the gross margin, and that's probably too high. So I can override the gross margin. Yeah, I can override the gross margin to 40%. So I'm assuming here, I probably can't. I might say 1% a year, but let's just keep it to that. So that changes. Okay, it means we have only got 750,000, and it's not 12 million, it's 6 million. But you can see the impact of the cumulative impact of small changes in the business. We then can look at cash flow, and we can see that the business has gone from an overdraft to cash in the bank. We can review the debtor days. Yeah, okay, that maybe that actually can't go below 50 for sake of argument. And can we get up to 49 days? Maybe we can only get to 35. So you can have a look. You know your business. We can use your understanding of your business to give you a good view into the future. And this is our strategic model. We have much more detailed tactical models and various bits and pieces. But I find this one really useful for that high-level discussion with clients. So now we move on. So looking at the direction of travel, you can see the forecasting packages that we have and the ability to measure your business and to look ahead. And this gives us the ability to look ahead on the valuation of your business. The system provides up to 7 different facets based on different methodologies, which then enables us to create a summary, and we can then create a weighting depending on how we think that the business could or should be valued. This particular report enables us to keep an eye on where your target valuation is, and when you wanted to be there. In this case, year 3, you can see that actually in year 3 we are going to be short. So that means that you have 2 years in order to take action to correct that situation. So looking at operational efficiency and reducing costs, we have a series of reports here, some summary reports, some board reports, which are based on financial years. The summary reports are based on rolling 12-month periods. We can look at performance trends, and we can analyze customers and suppliers, and even look at the return on investment on marketing. And then we have a series of financial forecasts which cover both profit and cash flow. We can take into account the development of equity or debt, or we can even take into account factoring of invoices, etc. So it's very sophisticated, and we should be able to cover any need that you have. We also have the ability to look at exit planning and particularly prepare for due diligence as and when you want to exit your business. The objective being to make sure that your company is deal ready at any time. So again, if you are interested in looking at this aspect of what we do further, then do get in touch. So we move on to exit planning. Clear strategy, options. We covered a bit around financial statements and due diligence, and some of the legal and tax issues. Obviously, some of the tax issues might change given events last week. So what's the next clear exit strategy? So what's your destination? I've all come across the Cheshire Cat in Alice in Wonderland, and Alice is asking the Cheshire Cat, which way should I go from where she is? And the Cheshire Cat says it depends on where you want to get to. Alice says, well, I don't really much care. And the Cheshire Cat says, well, it doesn't matter which way you go. Now, I would suggest it is important to care where you want to go, and then we can work out how to get there. So have you thought about your destination? Have you written it down? Do you use it in your decision making? Have you embedded it in your company? Do you want to maximize the value of your business? If you go back to the Company 360, you have the development of equity value as part of the strategic plan. Have you thought about it? Do you want to do it? And how committed are you to doing this? A lot of businesses not really interested. They're too busy on the day-to-day space, haven't got time or headspace for the strategic direction piece, and aren't really committed. So question, well, what are your goals? Do you have a budget for this project? Are you prepared to invest to achieve it? We look at timescale. There are 8 D's. So I mentioned earlier, are you ready to do a deal? If I turned up today and offered you 10 million or 100 million for your business, assuming that's what it's worth, could you complete in 4 weeks? Are you ready? Can you make a decision? Too many businesses just aren't. Oh, well, I've got this to do. No, no, too busy. The other side of this is that you can end up getting terribly distressed or have disagreement within the team, which actually takes away from value and actually takes away from your ability to get to that deal and decide space. There's also disease and disability. You might catch we've had plenty of this using COVID, where perhaps people did die or people ended up being severely impaired. And that can have a significant aspect on the business and your ability to continue in business and the value of the business. And then there's divorce and death. We don't get married expecting to get divorced, but a lot of people do. And a lot of instances, their divorce reduces the value of the business because extra debt has to be taken on or extra loans have to be taken on in order to pay out the departing spouse. And of course, we can all die in business. And some people might think that's a good idea and, I don't have to think about it. On the other hand, what about your staff? What about your family? What about your customers and suppliers? So perhaps it would be fair to them to at least plan for the inevitable time when you exit your business. So how long have you got? When do you want to sell? Now? 3 to 5 years? At a particular age? I've had an inquiry. He wanted to sell at 60. Had some people last year who wanted to sell at 30. I've had people who want to sell now or 6 months, and some people who, well, it's some point in the next 5 years. So how much advice have you taken? How much planning have you done? How much have you invested? We have a questionnaire called from Value Builder, which helps to assess your business's exit readiness and to provide a route map to getting it exit ready. If you are selling within 12 months, rule of thumb, there's a 40% discount. Can you afford that? 3 years is usually the minimum successful timescale. And that's largely because it's often a case of making some changes that have to show up in the financial statements in order to underpin the valuation that you would like, because anyone buying a business wants some proof that the profitability, cash flow, sales, and the trajectory are satisfactory and attractive. Under 1 year, over 1 but under 3, you may have to accept a discount. And 5 years is better because you get maximum time to really grow the business. In some instances, I'll come back to that later. So will you focus your time building equity value rather than just building sales and profit? So a question for all of you. We are very happy to make available the access to the Value Builder questionnaire and work with you to see what that says about your business. It provides an independent assessment of your saleability. It's a structured process for getting ready for exit. It identifies areas which need improvement, and perhaps most importantly, it is tried and tested with, I believe, currently over 75,000 people, businesses have used it. Looking at exit options. So what are the options? So you can sell outright, whatever it might be. Usually it's based around EBITDA. Might be a trade sale. Maybe some American software company will turn up and offer you a very large check, and you can just sell out and walk away. You can recapitalize. I was talking to my neighbor last week, and I think they're on their second recapitalization. They got some money, they grew the business. The investors decided they wanted to cash in, so they got another investor, and business is going great guns and has probably doubled in value in the last 5 years. you can liquidate the business. If you've got a lot of cash in the business, I had a client some years ago who was in the property industry business that was downturn in the market, and they had a lot of cash in the business, so they decided to liquidate it, took advantage of 10% capital gains tax, and thank you very much. It was right. They retained a few million in cash. You can change your role connected to recapitalization. I've come across businesses where the founder might be a technical person. I came across one a couple of years ago, and in 10 years, he'd got to 200,000 turnover. He was a techie. He was a professor. He invented this product, but he couldn't really sell it, and he wasn't really CEO. And the business had a sales director who didn't do any sales, and they had no sales department. And they were trying to raise money. Needless to say, I don't think they've raised much money to date. I came across another business, completely opposite. The founder had recognized his skill set. His role was chief technology officer, and they brought in a professional CEO who was one of the best CEOs I've ever come across. His capabilities were stunning. And that business will go. They'll get investors, they will grow the business, they'll make developments, and I would firmly expect them to float at some point in the future. So as you look forward, what is your preferred role that your skill set qualifies you for? The other one is if you've been CEO and you get to a point, maybe you want to be chairman. I've come across that. There was a company down in Haywards Heath, and the founder ended up being chairman, and they got in a professional CEO to develop the business and get it ready for sale. Transfer to children, perhaps less of an option these days than it might have been 40 or 50 years ago, but it's still possible if you have children who are in the business and want to carry on the business. And then finally, management buyout. I did one of those some years ago with a friend of mine. He was CEO of this particular division. It was up for sale, so he bought it. The Employee Benefit Trusts is a tax efficient vehicle, but it does come with risks. So there may be opportunities in that space. Key piece here is to connect your reasons for selling with the route for sale. And as you can see here, there are a variety of opportunities depending on why it is you want to sell out. And it's also important, I think, to think ahead. I was reading a statistic that 75% of people who sold their business regret it because they don't know what to do. There's only so many rounds of golf you can play. There is only so many Caribbean islands you can sit on, and there's only so many cruise ships that you might take cruises on. And if you've been used to being active and your brain active and considering business and juggling all the balls, alternatives can end up being a little dull. So do consider what it is you want to do, and as part of the process of getting ready to exit, start to plan and to test out what you might do so that when you get to having sold the business, you're happy. So, well, another 10 minutes or so. Question, how much do you need? The balance is thinking around 32 times your current income. What's your time scale? And I've already talked about, do you have a sale, or do you have a business, or do you have a job? I'll talk a little bit in a minute about the 8 drivers of value. And the other question is there a gap between what the business is worth now and what you need? Which means effectively that you need to grow the business in order to get it to a state that you can actually sell it. So 8 key drivers of value. Obviously, financial performance. The more profit you have, the better. Growth potential is even more important. What is the trajectory of your annual year-on-year growth, and what does that look like going forward? Again, significant multiples will be given for fast-growing businesses. The Switzerland structure is how dependent are you on any one customer, supplier, or employee? Shouldn't be more than 15%. The seesaw here is, do you generate cash or do you consume it? So as business grows, you have to go and get more and more working capital. Importance there is to look at your pricing and your payment terms. Recurring revenue, we've already covered a bit of that in the analysis of the sales and how much revenue do you not have to go and find again, particularly if you've got SaaS businesses, you've got a lot of recurring revenue, but then people can just turn it off. So what's the situation? Monopoly control is the extent to which you set prices or prices are set by others. And we talked a bit about that around where are you in the market. And then again, that fits back to the pricing piece that we discussed earlier. Customer satisfaction, again, connects back to the day space in customer retention. Perhaps an underestimated, underappreciated area. What do your customers think of you? Will they refer business? And I've come across recently some assessments around customer satisfaction that, if done properly, reveal that perhaps they're not as satisfied as they say they are. And finally, hub and spoke is how dependent is the business on you? Because if the business is totally dependent on you, then do you have a business or do you have a job? And if the business won't last without you, then maybe you haven't got a business you can sell. I've talked about recurring revenue particularly and pricing. Now, looking at the financial statements and due diligence, as I've shown you that we have a lot of reports around this area which can provide information around the financial statements and also the information relating to due diligence. Legal and tax considerations. Do you have a shareholders agreement? Do you have some funny share structures, priority payments to certain people, premiums on redemption? Are you taking care of your staff? A friend of mine, when they sold the business, I think he paid every member of staff 12 months' salary. It was nothing. There wasn't a consideration. There was no legal requirement, but he just chose to do it. But look at the current legalities. Like I had a business, I was involved in a business, and we had a really complicated share structure because we had to take into account different people's investments at different times, and it was particularly complex. The other bit to look at, and I think this is underestimated, is the sales agreement. What's your earn-out terms? What's the upfront payment? And perhaps the most important piece here is the earn-out. Can you cope with what the earn-out says? If it says you've got to be there for 5 years, if you've worked for yourself for 20 or 30 or 40 years, can you work for somebody else? If the answer is no, then you probably shouldn't be taking the terms. Or if you do, you need to realize that you are going to have to see it through. The other issues are that people can if you can't control the fulfillment of those terms, you may find that the acquiring company actually makes it nearly impossible for you to achieve that, because actually it's in their interests not to pay you. So again, these areas fraught with pitfalls, and good advice is valuable. And then the whole tax issue. Changes in corporation tax, well, we've been promised none. Some jurisdictions you might have a withholding tax for moving money out of the country. National insurance has gone down recently, but it might go up. Dividend tax keeps getting amended and changed. There's questions around whether capital gains tax will go up, and inheritance tax. And in some jurisdictions, you might have some form of rollover relief, where if you reinvest in a new business, you basically don't pay tax until you sell the assets on the final business that you've invested in. So successful transition, finding good buyer or grooming successors, looking at the Switzerland structure and hub and spoke, and looking at capability. We talked about the 8 leadership modules earlier, and working and developing them, developing the abilities and the innovation needed to deploy them. And you may need to acquire businesses to for succession planning. I think the classic example was Vickers acquiring Rolls-Royce, not because they liked cars, but they liked the CEO, and they bought the company because the CEO became the CEO of their company as well. 40 odd million to acquire a good CEO. Identifying buyers, looking at the market, there are financial buyers out there who will buy stuff because they see a good income. They can turn their own money and buy it, and they're looking at the cash flow. You might find strategic buyers who are looking at product synergies, or as I talked earlier, want to get in a particular geographical market, or there may be financial savings that I've talked about earlier. But understanding what they're buying is very important. And then communication, when do you tell staff, what do you tell staff, who do you tell? In the future space, the stakeholder alignment becomes very important in this. Is everybody lined up and agreed? Have we got regular communication? And I call it managing bad news. And finally, you need to keep staff and clients when you sell the business, because often what you get paid is determined by those people, certainly clients staying, and there may be key members of staff that are needed as well. So importance of regular communication, and also looking at business development. That needs to continue and mustn't be switched off, because again, it will have an impact on the value that you get for the business. And market forces, you've got individual forces and business, and I'm going to call it international, global aspects that will affect your business. So the final bits on business readiness. What are you prepared to invest in time to get ready? Are you putting enough time? Are you prepared to commit time? Are your team on board? And your management, so ownership and management, I'm assuming, are separate. So there's a question of everyone being in it together. If you'd like any help, always happy to talk.